There we go. There we go. What's up? Welcome to the Impact Podcast Show. It's your boy Coach A. Got the beautiful Miss Melissa and my brother-in-law, the inmate or fake inmate, Jody.
So
What's
I'm in
up?
Facebook jail right now, so I'm an inmate until
Oh, I
tomorrow
get
Oh,
it.
morning.
that's right.
I get it. I gotta realize that. You know what? I gotta realize that all your names that you come up, you clever. All your names that you come up with always have some type of connection to what's going on in your life currently. So, are you not playing the video game no more?
Well, I gotta go handle some family business. But when I get back, you know what I'm saying? When I get
Yeah.
back, I'm on that. On that.
Melissa,
What's up?
how you doing? Most people don't realize that I've been trying to get Melissa in as my co-host, or you know what I'm saying, and get her to take over some of the reins.
Amy, let's see how it goes. Let's see how it goes.
You know, I would throw
Don't
the
be so
pressure on you.
bad.
So you
Gotta
having a
give
good
it a
week?
go.
I hope
Yes,
we
I
hope everybody
am.
having a good week for sure.
Yes, definitely.
It's Friday, so I can't complain.
Yeah, that's right. I had to send an apology out for the people that got my post confused, thinking that my wife was in labor when she wasn't. Yeah. I posted that the baby, the head was in position, the heart, the weight, everything was good. He just waiting for the doors to open. And people was like, "Oh, congratulations, congratulations!" I was like, "Oh, I had people calling and stuff." But
Hey, I ain't gonna lie. I was like, dang, he doing a podcast and he just had a baby. I guess he might
I
be.
thought that too, Joe. I was like,
I thought I was
wait.
crazy. I'm like, Coach A gonna do a podcast and he just had the baby.
That's,
no,
that's so
no,
funny.
no, I know.
Oh,
So
man.
I apologize. That was the miscommunication, which is what our topic is today. Is communicating. Very important topic because I don't know if you guys realize it, but every experience that we have, good or bad, is linked to communication, linked to some form of communication. And so I feel like this topic, even though it's kind of, underrated, communication is underrated at times, is very, very important. And so I think it's something that we should definitely get into and help people become a better communicator,
Right.
right? What do you think about becoming a better communicator?
I
I
definitely
mean,
agree.
there's always room to improve on communication.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Very true.
So before we do that, Melissa, I have an intro that I just put together. Let me see if I can run. I want you to check this out. All right, and then we'll be back after the intro.
Yeah, look, treat me like a rock. When you see me, I'm electrifying. Yeah, only talk I do is edifying. They say preach, they say church when I'm testifying. Hear you running at the mouth, that's a lot of mileage. Grew up in the woods, 30 miles from the nearest college.
Oh, look at you.
Yeah,
Oh, hey, I see you with the red Maserati in the background. I was like, look at Coach A starting with the sports car.
Ooh.
I'm capping. Every once in a while, capping is good. Young
Oh,
people say it. Young people say it. So, but yeah, I threw that together today. I gotta fix it so that of course it fits the whole screen and stuff like that. But I want you guys to check it out, see how it is. So today we're talking about 7 keys, right? We talked about keys, basic keys to becoming a better communicator.
yep.
Very important. And like we was just talking about before, communicating is connected to all of our experiences. And I personally believe, like I mentioned, that I think it's underrated. I think it'd be underrated. A lot of times we just take it for granted. We take it for granted. And so
Right.
what I want to do is get into, some basic elements that can help us become better communicators. Because when you become a better communicator, you're going to have better experiences in
Right.
relationships. You have better relationships and experiences at work, all these things, because relationships is the key for sure. So, Jody, inmate Jody.
What's up?
So, just take a guess. Like, take a guess. What would be something very, very beneficial to for communication? Like a basic. What would you call a basic key?
The basic key for communication.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
Basic key
Somebody told me this.
for
Somebody
good
told me this.
communication.
Right? Somebody told me this a long time ago. It says when you listen to somebody talk, you need to listen to understand what they're saying instead of listening for a response, to make a response. So if you listen to try to understand what they're trying to tell you instead of listening just so you can have a response, then I think that that's a major step in actually communicating with people. Sometimes people can't always get what they feel out right with their words, so you might take it a little way. So I think listening to understand instead of listening to respond is the best way that you can communicate with somebody.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's actually one of the first things that I have on my list. It's called, being an active listener. A lot of times, just like you mentioned, people just waiting for their turn to talk. They're not trying to actually understand what you're saying. They're just waiting on their turn to talk, either to they're waiting on to have a rebuttal or to argue or whatever the situation is, or even being defensive. And so it's important because when you have two people communicating, people want to be heard, and not only do people want to be heard, but the most important is they want to be understood. And if we don't take time to ask questions, part of being an active listener is asking questions, making sure that whatever the person is feeling or they express, that you understand it. So, and that comes with the individual. You really have to want to understand what somebody else is saying, or the way they're coming at you. I mean, what they're coming from. Would you say,
Right.
Melissa?
Yeah, I agree. I think to what Jody said, listening to that person and not with the intention to just talk, right?
Mhm.
Because that's a lot of times how misunderstandings can happen too. You know, it's misconstruing whatever the person is saying, and and it just makes a whole other problems. I think a lot of our problems are like the root of them is just lack of understanding. And if you think about it, lack of understanding can come from not listening, not listening and then learning to apply what you heard.
That's true. Well, because obviously you can't. There's no way you're going to be able to understand if you don't get all the information.
Right,
If you
right.
only hear bits and pieces, or you only hear or accept the stuff that you like, or you what you're listening for. So yeah,
Hmm.
that's true.
Or
Lack
like
of understanding. Go ahead,
or
Joe.
like selective listening. People like
Oh yeah.
Oh, snap.
I listen. I ain't gonna lie. I used to have this girlfriend, and no matter what we talked about, it's like she heard enough to where she could be mad and offended, and then that was it. You don't hear nothing else I said, just enough for you to be mad and offended.
Oh
So
my
it's like
god.
selective listening, only listening to a point where you just like, all right, I'm done listening. Like that's not effective communicating either.
And
Wow, that was
men
a whole
men
mouthful.
we get blamed for that all the time too. Like,
You know
Oh
what?
man.
my
You
mom
know
used
what
to
though?
say that to me.
Hey, I tell you what, arguing is a form of communication, right? And I tell you what,
It's not
no
good.
matter, but listen
I
though,
think it's not.
no matter what the argument is, right? I tell you what, Coach will answer your question. So no matter how much you argue with Coach, he gonna give you an answer to everything you ask.
For sure.
Hmm.
Because he decided to start the week off on some foolishness this week, and it turned into like a 4 hour argument. And yet he answered every single question, no matter what. He answered it. As annoying as the answer was, he answered it. So he effectively communicated his nonsense, right? That's what I can respect that and I can appreciate that. It was nonsense, but he effectively communicated.
No, no nonsense. The reason I do that is because I expect the same in return. You know,
Mm,
I expect the same in return, and so that is a great segue to the next point that I have. You know, is disagree. You can have a disagreement. Again, we talked about basic keys of being a better communicator. You can disagree, but don't be dismissive, right? Don't be
true.
dismissive. Don't act like what the other person is saying is not important or
Right.
doesn't have any effect at all. In fact, we should, if part of, we mentioned being an active listener and to understand what they're saying, acknowledge, try to get, have an open mind and see where they're coming from.
Right.
And so that's part of another basic is that we don't be dismissive with other people whenever they, their opinions is different than ours.
Right, right. I mean, listen, especially too, like we all have something in common. We're human,
Yeah.
right? And we go through highs and lows, and it's important. I mean, also to me, in my opinion, in addition to not being dismissive, is learning emotional intelligence. You know, like learning how to control certain emotions. In some cases, it might be difficult,
Mhm.
but I think like a constant progression toward controlling your emotions to a point where when you get in a disagreement, it's not like you said, Coach. It's not dismissive or disrespectful. You know, however they take it. But how you deliver it is everything, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And part of that problem with being dismissive is that people can pick up on that. And
Right,
so when people pick up on that, they'll automatically feel disrespected or they'll feel like, what's the use? And so
right,
once their emotion gets involved, that's going to take the whole conversation down another lane. That's when you get into that hardcore arguing and stuff like that when people feel like that.
yeah.
So, that's why it's important not to be dismissive.
I agree with that for sure. So I mean, with I mean, how has it been for you guys? You know, like have you ever had a moment where you caught yourself being dismissive, and what was the reaction of that person? And how were you able to like did you realize that you were being dismissive? I guess the question is, have you been dismissive? And I know I have. So
Hmm.
us being human, at some point we might have. Um, but did you catch yourself, and how did you notice the other person react? Because those are also things to observe, right? Like when
Yeah,
you're communicating, knowing how to read the other person, and knowing where you might have to just kind of eat some words, right? Or
yeah,
eat something
yeah,
in efforts to avoid or to perpetuate some kind of conflict, you know?
yeah.
Um, I realized I was doing it when my mindset was no matter what you tell me, I believe you or I'm not going to listen. And then they kind of was just like, bro, ain't no point in me talking because no matter what you say, you're not going to hear me out. And I was like, like I said, I was like, I'm being closed minded. So it's like, I wasn't really trying to hear anything they had to say. So I felt like at that point, I was probably being what you described was dismissive because I'm not trying to hear anything you say, no matter how much sense it might make at the moment's time because my
Mm,
too emotional at the moment. So I think at that point I was probably being dismissive.
Exactly. And a lot of people can hide it. I've been dismissive before. Sometimes it was hidden, and I had to catch myself like I'm not really paying attention or I'm not really, caring about what they're saying. So I need to engage more. And so then, I start to engage and because, sometimes depending on the conversation, especially I think a lot of times it happens when it's situations where we feel like we know we're right, right? We feel like we know we're right, and we think the other person is dead wrong, and so it don't, you don't even need to say what you need to say because it's wrong.
So you
like
mean
I already know.
a
No,
life?
I already know what you're gonna say.
Yeah,
Hey, so you mean being Jimmy? So
You
that's
guys
a
be
day in the life
roasting
of
me.
Jimmy.
we all do it. It ain't just Jimmy. Everybody do it. From
Or Jim,
everybody feel like. In fact, I'm gonna tell you what I do. Sometimes when I'm arguing so strongly about something, that I catch myself and be like, you know what? I need to really check my information and make sure and listen to them because I've been wrong before. I've been so stuck on my point and, this is right, this is right. And come to find out that I was wrong or I wasn't really listening to them. I wasn't understanding what it's not that they was wrong or I was right, but I wasn't understanding where they was coming from. And so that
Mm,
once I understood where it was coming from, I'm like, oh, okay, I see. I see why you feel like that now. I see. I understand. You're not. That's not how you
eat a
mean.
little
That's not what
slice
you
of
mean.
humble pie, right?
Exactly.
but like, it depends on the argument. Because if the argument is an argument of facts, then there's always just fact checking. Like you hop on Google. But I think that happens when you get in an argument about opinion. Because your opinion, my opinion might be different from yours. So when you get into a heated argument about opinions, then it's like that's when I think a lot of listening kind of goes out the door because now it's like emotionally felt in here that I feel like I'm right and you wrong, but you feel like I'm wrong and you right. So like I start,
Mhm.
now I'm not listening. So I think that's what happens when you get like a opinionated.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
That's a good point.
Shout out to Denarius Mason. That's my brother. One of the he works over at Loving Hands. My hoop brother as well.
Mhm.
Appreciate you chiming in, bro.
Awesome.
So yes, and
Yes,
anybody that's
yes.
listening for sure, if you have some key elements for good communication, let us know. We want to know how you feel. If you feel like you need to improve, Naria said he needs to improve for sure. I think
Oh,
we
there's
can
two
all.
points because I know
Yeah, I
I
think we
agree.
can all. So moving along, Melissa, you have you have a key for us?
A key, me, I
Yeah.
think definitely dialogue. I think I mentioned it, or I mentioned it to somebody. It wasn't any of you. But expressing how you feel, like if you know your attitude or your mood is off, I think that's okay to communicate. Like for
Hmm.
me, communication is dialogue. Like we gotta have some kind of words. Like I can't have a full day go by and I don't have a conversation with you. Like there's people that actually do that. Like I'm talking about people that live together. Like that actually do that. So for whatever reason. But again, my reason in saying this one key is have dialogue. It's important to express how you're feeling. I think it's something that helps me. And it's also empathizing with that person. Like, hey, I feel that way. I understand, I comprehend how you might be feeling, but this is what I found, and we're going to talk about it, and then we'll come back together when we're ready to talk about it. But just say something, you know, and at least to put the pillow down, saying like, hey, I mean, you might be upset about something, and it has nothing to do with the people around you, but it reflects that way. And so I think that's why dialogue is one of my biggest keys for communication.
Yeah, and I think that's connected to what Jody mentioned is being open and honest as well. So,
Right.
like in your dialogue, you have to be, open and honest with how you're feeling and what's going on. And so, a lot of times, people are not honest, and so that creates an environment. And even if you're not communicating, like you said, if there's no dialogue, these things create
Send a text.
negative emotions, right? It
Yeah.
creates insecurity. If you're not communicating, you don't know how the other person feel. You don't know if they
Yep.
care about you or if they care what you say. None of these things. And so when a person starts to feel insecure, right, then all the other negative emotions are followed along with it. Distrust. They become distrusting, and so
Mm,
all these emotions are connected to each other, and they can be helped by just communicating, you know,
absolutely.
just communicating. And I have, as far as being honest, I have I came across a saying that says dealing with the hurt of being honest is much better than um, dwelling in the what is it? Dwelling in the anger of a lie.
Mm, mm,
So think about that. Because a lot of
right,
people are brutally honest. They'll just tell you the truth and it might hurt your feelings,
right,
right?
right. Yeah, that's another thing. And that was back to my I'm sorry, Jody, you were gonna say something?
No, yeah, go ahead.
No, no, no. I was laughing because Coach L was like, "If we're brutally honest," I was like, he must be talking about our group chat because we just be just going off of that thing.
Yeah.
I swear, and then on Saturdays I feel like I get a little chunk of like your whole vibe. I'm like, oh my gosh. But what I was gonna say is the brutally honest thing, right? So honesty and transparency is super super important. And back to my point earlier about the delivery, right? I think that we could be so fixed on being so honest and brutally honest that we don't care, or we tend to have like that ego and be like, well, I'm just gonna let it be known how it is, it is
Yeah.
what it is. And there are people that actually we say it to ourselves. I've done it to myself. I'm like, yeah, I'm just gonna let it be known how it is, whatever, however they take it, however they take it. But I think at that moment is where we need to check our ego at the door and take a step back and be like, okay, I'm saying it, but what's the intention of me saying it? Like, because I'm not gonna say it to break somebody down. I try to be very careful with my words and how I utilize them when I speak to people. Like I want to build people up, even if I don't like you. I'm gonna let you know, but I'm gonna tell you why. You know what I mean? Like I'm gonna give you a reason. I'm gonna explain. I'm gonna just express myself. You know, nothing. I'm not trying to bash somebody just to bash somebody. And I think that that's what we see a lot of in society today.
So again, that open and honesty, like we talking about, it just helps foster that healthy relationship. So,
Right.
if you think about it on the flip side, if you're being dishonest, it creates all those negative feelings, which fosters unhealthy relationship. So if you're being honest, then you have the opposite. You have a person that's confident and trusting in you. That's how you build trust. And so that fosters and helps the positive relationships. And
Right. Let me
so
correct
most people,
myself, Adrian. I'm sorry. Not like you, but like something that you are doing. Because
Mhm.
people are people. You know what I'm saying? Like if we don't like each other, then just stay away from each other. But I want to correct myself because I think that's important. There's something that I don't like about you, and I feel like it affects me in some kind of way because we might be close. I'm gonna let you know, and then
right.
leave it at that. That's what I meant.
And that's going to be it. And that's going to bring us to our next point, that, this is something we've heard for years and years. Sometimes it's not always what you say, is how you say it.
Right.
And so a lot of times, if you're communicating and you're being brutally honest and you letting somebody know how you feel, or, whatever you're expressing yourself, it's the way, it's coming out. Are you,
Right.
at a high defensive level? Are you being disrespectful? Are you yelling? Are you know what I'm saying? And some
Mm-hmm.
people get defensive when you attack them like that. Even in the Bible, it tells us that, a soft, what to say, like a soft word, or,
Turns away that.
turns away wrath. Yeah. So, and so naturally, if you come into a situation with a positive attitude and a positive emotions, and seek to really understand and not be disrespectful, you'll find it a lot better. Your conversations, your disagreements will flow a lot better. And it's very important
I agree.
that we do that. So it's not always what you say, it's how you say it.
Some things are better left unsaid too. You gotta
Hold on.
definitely
What
learn
things are
that.
better left unsaid?
Yeah, what things better left us? You're gonna have to enlighten us.
I'm
I mean, just in general, there's some things that are better left unsaid. I think it's really it's more personal. You know, it's
Yeah,
per scenario. But
yeah.
there are some things that that could hit the nerve. You know, it
You
can
know
hit
it.
it, especially if there's people around that you're close with. You know where it hurts, and so I think that in those cases when I mean, I don't know. Like I said, you just gotta use discernment. You gotta
I
be
bet
wise.
Jody good at that. Jody good at that.
Yeah, you
that
gotta be
button.
smart.
Hitting that button, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
man.
sometimes people bring it at you. I'll be like, you know what? I didn't want to say this, but Deontay Wilder sucks. Now you made me say it. Now we gotta go there. I wasn't trying to be hurtful, but he sucks. I don't know what to say. And then they just bring it out you, and then here comes an argument. So I get it. It's best delivery is 90% of I feel like this. You know what I'm saying? I feel like with your delivery, your delivery is dependent on if people are going to actually listen to you or not. You
Yeah.
know what
Right.
I'm saying? Like from the first two words, that person either going to engage in listening actively or they about to tune you out. So
Yeah.
your
Right.
delivery your delivery is a very important part of like actively listening. Because if you coming at somebody crazy, then they're gonna shut down.
Right.
Or they're gonna
That's
come
very
at you
important.
crazy.
Right. Or come at you crazy. Right. There are things also that I learned in some of my career training, like when you're in a heated argument or something, and you tell the other person who's heated to calm down. They were like, never tell a person who's angry to calm
Yeah.
down because that'll just rile them up more. So it's just something that I learned. I did that mistake once after training. Go figure, like how we go back to old habits. And let me just tell you the result. It was not pleasant. It was the most embarrassing thing. One of the most embarrassing moments of my career, definitely. But
Well,
But
like
we
I've
do.
always had that. I've always been told that when you deal with women, don't tell a pissed off woman to calm down
I think it goes
because you're
both
asking for
ways.
trouble.
Yeah, and sometimes they can take if the other person is upset and they going off and you talking all calm and sometimes they take that offensive too. Like sometimes it feels like a no win situation. Like you all calm like yes I understand what
Yes,
you're saying.
yes,
You being
I've seen
That
condescending
that.
or why you
hey, that sounds like Coach A talking from experience right
Oh
there.
my
yeah
God, yes, that
yeah
is
that's
so
me.
funny.
So why are you yelling? I don't understand.
Coach A seems like the type of dude they be like, "Oh, you listen. I understand that you're cursing me out, and I understand that you're upset. So I feel like we should stop, take a minute, and pray about this because
Exactly.
you're upset, so we can have a
Oh
adult
my God, we
conversation."
should take a
Because
Exactly.
moment.
You know,
hey,
listen, how
Coach A,
about
Coach A
let's
be like, "Cause
reconvene?
you being this angry, it's not good for your health, my brother. Okay, you gonna hold it in and hold Coach A
That's
like Coach
it.
A that dude.
That's
Coach
it.
A that dude.
That's it.
Wow,
Like, you know what? Let's
that
reconvene at a later time
right. You
when
can
your
take some
emotions
time.
are under control. But that's important though. If you think about it in all seriousness, it's important. You don't have to have every conversation right then. It don't have to be
Right,
dealt with right then.
right.
Unless it's
But it
something.
needs to be dealt with before the next day. I'm sorry.
Yes, I agree. I
I think
agree.
it definitely needs to be at least make a peace. I mean, there's
Depending on
scenarios,
it depends on
right?
the
It doesn't
severity of it.
exactly,
If
exactly.
it's if you have two people that they're going to talk about this at another time and they can sit down and eat and talk about some
Right,
other stuff and watch TV or you know
right,
they can still communicate together, then that's fine. But if you have two people that's not talking to each other,
right.
then you
Yeah, no,
shouldn't put that
that's a
in
different
the thing.
scenario. This
Yeah.
is more like
Uh,
marital relationship, like kind of, you know, in a sense.
I feel like with my podcast brothers, that's a form of relationship because
It is.
sometimes like Jimmy will piss me off, and
Yeah.
then I'm gonna go to work for a few hours, but I'm coming back to this argument because I got some more stuff to get off my chest. Because I say it for now instead of saying it then. So I got some more
Yeah.
stuff to say. But like now I'm effectively listening, right? And people listen, you know what I'm saying? Because I told Jimmy it hurt my feelings when you said you didn't have time for me.
Yeah.
So he called me yesterday and we talked for a little bit because he
We'll
made
do
time
that.
for me. So I felt like, you know what? I said it hurt my feelings in a calm manner, right? He listened and we resolved the problem. And now we all good. I love him
That's
again.
great. I love,
Yeah.
I
And
love
I
it.
love
I understand where you're coming from too, because sometimes just being honest, sometimes because you guys have a longer relationship, y'all been together in high school and stuff like that. And so sometimes, I feel I'm left out. Like I don't have that connection. But I understand that that's just me personally, which is the next point that I'm coming up is that everything, we can't be selfish. Everything is not centered around us.
Mm,
So in the
hardly ever.
conversation where we're talking, you might have to realize that, you know what, it's not about you. Let the other person express themselves. Let them talk.
well, I know a few people that I probably, well, if I wasn't in Facebook jail, but we would have had to tag a few people on that. But it ain't always about you. The world does not revolve around you. But listen, I got to get going. I appreciate y'all having me.
It's always a
I'll
pleasure.
I'll be watching. Thank you for having me. Y'all have a good night.
All
You
right, have a
too.
good one, Joe.
Peace out, Coach and
Don't
Melissa.
forget our meeting. Ain't we
Bye.
having a meeting tonight?
At 7:30 in the hour. Yeah, send me the link for that one too. Cause I ain't by my
It's
laptop.
gonna be on the other one. All right,
All right.
later.
Bye.
Peace out. Bye.
But yeah, that's our boy Jody. We just talked about what was the last thing we were talking about? Oh, it's not all about you.
Right.
Eliminating when you communicating, eliminate selfishness. So don't make the conversation only about you, but make sure that you allow the other person to express themselves and don't talk long and loud and often. You know, give the
Not in
floor up.
not in both. Oh man,
Give the
it's just
floor
there's
up.
a volume. Like the volume is like right when you, especially when you're passionate about something, right?
Yeah.
That's what happens. A lot of times, passion just comes out when you're speaking, and that could be offensive too. I'm not saying whatever. Like you can't control everything, you know.
Yeah, that's
But
me. That's me. Sometimes when I'm passionate, sometimes I get loud, or you know how
yes,
it is. And so, I don't, you don't try to be offensive, but that's just how you are when you're passionate about something.
and then it's like that passive aggressive when you're like super calm all of a sudden after being like really loud and passionate. You're like, yes, and then so right now the point is, this is what I want to say. Oh,
So, what about another thing is body language?
mhm.
Communicating back and forth is important that we pay attention to the body language and really understand, because a person, these things happen. Sometimes you with somebody and they're saying everything is okay or they feel good, but the body language might be showing something different, and so
Absolutely,
you know
absolutely.
if you really pay attention and you see that somebody's body language is showing you that there might be something wrong or something going on, then it'll give you a hint of how you should respond. You might not want to, you might want to pour in a lot more positive stuff to kind of offset that negative environment or the negative feelings or emotions that's going on at the time, as
Very
opposed
true.
to just responding regularly. I think that's important. It
But
happens a lot of times.
there's a book, coach, called "What Everybody Is Saying," and
Oh, I like
it's
that play
check
of
it out.
words.
I'm gonna type it in here actually. Check it out. It's an ex FBI agent, and he's gonna type his.
It's a
So
communication book, huh? About
yeah, it's communication.
nonverbal communication.
Right, nonverbal, learning how to read it, and then also because we mentioned body language,
Hmm.
and it's one of the things that he mentions in there, and it helps for like dangerous situations as well, and like just increasing your situational awareness, which is super important in the day in the digital age that we're in, right, where everybody's just so planted in their phones. But I'm gonna post it on here actually in the comments. So that you
Yeah, that's good. I put that in the thing. I have to definitely look that up. But because I feel like a lot of people don't really pay attention to body language that often. You know.
No. Well, I think I'm getting the hang of this kind of I think a bit more quickly. But
Yeah, it's all
all
right.
over.
It just went through all the things. But
That's
yeah, so you know, when you recognize that somebody their body language is showing you one thing and they're saying something else, so that's not it's also not the time to try to get them to talk about it if they don't feel like talking about it. Or,
right.
sometimes if they
Absolutely.
telling you, everything's fine and but they're acting different and it's not, then obviously they don't feel comfortable talking about it right now. So you can just let them know that, hey, whenever you feel comfortable or whenever you want to talk about it, because I recognize that something's not quite right now. So we can talk about it at another time or whenever you're ready.
Right.
So I feel like that's important.
Very good.
Know,
Very,
you
very good.
you give them their space at the time. You give them their space, and then you also respect how they feel as well.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because
Ask
we all been
questions.
through it. Yeah, yeah. Because we all been through it for sure. So what
Definitely.
about um, always having a loving or caring approach to communication?
That's a good question. I think like in the root of it, like you gotta have love. Like why else would you be communicating to somebody?
Well, think about this.
Mhm.
Think about this. If you come into a conversation with somebody and you already have a negative mindset about that person, or then your response, the way you talk to them, is gonna come out based on how you feel. And
Mhm.
so when you go to communicate with somebody, communication, you should have a clean slate. That way
Mhm.
you're open to understand what they're saying, as opposed to have this preconceived notion already, or
Right.
thinking that, they're not going to listen, or, they always, being disrespectful, whatever the case can be.
Right, right. Well, you gotta know your audience too. So if we're talking about communication, like, you know, if you're at a conference, or right now we're on this public platform on social media. So it's knowing your audience and knowing how you're communicating, what you're going to communicate, right? Um, and now when you talk about like more intimate setting, like with family, with your spouse, I think that kind of changes a little bit too. I think at the root of there's gonna be love, right? But then what about in a in an unfavorable situation? How you're gonna communicate there. So I think love, yes, but there's truth, there's being firm, right?
Yeah,
And just holding ground. I think it's being in between, being that line right in between passive and aggressive, right? And if you gotta get aggressive, then you gotta get aggressive, but utilize it wisely is what I'm saying. Wisdom is needed for sure.
absolutely. I think that's important for sure. So especially again, like you mentioned, when it comes to relationships and dealing with a significant other, you just kind of take it person by person
Right,
when it comes to communicating. What about compromising? Compromising is a form of communicating. Obviously, you can't always, you can't compromise on everything, but whenever there is a healthy compromise, you should take it as
right.
opposed to just making sure everything is you get what you want or one person always get what they want. There has to be some time in some situation a healthy compromise. But
Mhm.
obviously you can't compromise with everything.
No, there's some things, and compromising may not always be meeting in the middle. Compromising might be letting the other person take it all. Maybe
Oh,
that.
no, they don't want to hear that now.
Right, I know, but you know what? This is like the mature way of thinking about a situation. Like a compromise might not always make you happy, but if it's not wrong either, you know what I mean? Then it's kind of learning how to give. Give, and then later on it'll come to you. I
Exactly.
really do believe in reaping what you sow.
That's how you create. That's how you bring that harmony back, which is important.
Right. Oh
You
man,
bring that
especially internal peace. I think for me, peace
yes,
is the most
especially.
important thing. So if I can have peace with the situation, great. And you're happy? Great. That's how I feel, for sure.
She said she's
Exactly.
right. Exactly. She said she's right.
For real.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so and we know that harmony is definitely important when it comes to relationships, and all
Right.
that is stemmed towards can be connected to our communication,
Mm-hmm.
with individuals and our each situation, and so just keeping that in mind. Um, when we're talking about that, Melissa, any we done went through about 6 or 7 um, already. Uh,
Wow, really?
yeah. You
That's
have any
awesome.
more to add? You might as well give me some
Um,
bonuses. We're
right.
talking about, and if you guys have ideas or what methods do you have in becoming an effective communicator?
Right.
Are you an effective communicator, or what makes you not? If you feel like you're not, what what makes you not at this point?
Definitely. Definitely. I think back to, well, dialogue, of course, because that's one of the main things. But asking questions, right? Learning how to ask questions. I mean, I didn't go to the Bible about this, right? Because when we look at our Savior, Jesus was always like asking questions, right? Like
Yeah.
people would come to him for answers, and it wasn't like he would give it right then and there. He would speak in parables, right? But he would ask questions, and it would guide the person to come to recognition, of a situation or a sin, whatever they were facing. So I think that it's like such a perfect example to go by, asking a
Yeah.
lot of questions, but asking questions because you genuinely want to understand. And I think that the more informed we can be, especially about something that we care about and that we're passionate about, that can help, pour into our harmony tank, right? Or be more at peace, or cultivate that environment and then help other people kind of also get there. Because I think that we, like, wherever we are in life, there's always some kind of, we're not always, like, maybe, like, I don't know if this is the right term, but the yoke, like being that equal yoke, but it's not always going to be right there. Like, we're not always going to see eye to eye. But if we are fixed on saying, hey, well, I'm willing to help you if you help me, and we're just going to help each other get there. I know it's easier said than done, but when you make a decision and you preset your mind to do that, it comes easier when, like, to see when the opportunity is present. If that makes sense.
Yeah, of course it makes sense. So how do we fix communication? Like if we feel like we have poor communication, in our relationship or overall, how do we fix it?
That's a good question. I think admitting or realizing that we don't have it all together. You know, I think that's the first thing, and then but also recognizing where you do have it together, right? Because there are weaker vessels and there are more stronger vessels. So because we're weaker or stronger doesn't mean we're better than one another. I think it's an opportunity. Like, it's an opportunity to help each other. Obviously, where you put your time to, and I would advise everybody to focus on what your time is going to. Like, invest your time in what's most important and that you need to build up. Obviously, your family relationships, your friendships, like your close friendships, before you go outside, before you trying to help, somebody else that's not, like, immediate to you. Not that that's wrong, but what I'm saying is beginning internally, like in your circle, and then working your way out. And I think that that'll strengthen your village, right? Because we weren't meant to do life alone. So that'll strengthen the core, right? And quote unquote, like, in parentheses, like your core group. And then now you have people like on the same wavelength, right? And now you can start outsourcing. Now you can start talking to other people about the stuff that they need help with. And then you have other minds that think alike because you guys have been in the trenches together, that'll also be able to help you minister, right? Or help other people that need that support.
Exactly. So again, and just to add to that, first of all, you have to want to improve your
Yeah,
communication.
this is tough.
First, that's first and foremost, is you have to, like you mentioned, admit or really come to grips that you have a problem or there's an issue, and then you have to want it to be better. It has to be a strong desire. I believe everything has to come out of a strong desire in order for it to really improve, because we're used to our regular habits. We have our habits, and so and we live off of yesterday. Everything that we're doing today is based off of yesterday's information. So if you have a, a bad experience with somebody, then when you go to approach them or talk to them the next time, you're gonna think about that. And
Yeah,
it might affect you. And so by you wanting to be a better communicator, you're able to first become emotionally aware, as you mentioned before, emotionally aware of how you're feeling, and then
yeah,
follow the steps.
yeah,
Use some of these
yeah,
basic
for real.
guidelines that we mentioned to become a better communicator.
Yeah. Or
And
write a letter. Adrian, I don't know if you've ever done that, but I mean, there are times that I felt like my words weren't suffice to get a point across. And I find that when I write, um, my thoughts just flow a lot more freely and I'm able to organize it better in my mind because I'm putting it on paper and I feel like, okay, this is like I'm talking to myself, like I'm praying, I'm talking to myself, or whatever it is, however you want to, consider it. But now I'm like reading and writing and feeling what I have inside. And then I'm able to probably, articulate it. I think it helps me articulate it better. And then later on, if I got to express it, sometimes I find that with writing, I don't even have to say it to the person. Sometimes,
oh,
because I let it out.
mhm.
And it was probably just a matter of something that you needed to let go. And there might not be ears human ears to really perceive what you're feeling, and sometimes I just put it on paper, and I don't do it always, but I find that when I do, it makes me feel better. And if I gotta say something, then I say something.
Yeah, there is a lot of people. I've heard that before. There's a lot of people that do that, that write letters, in order to help them communicate or get over certain situations or things. Like, maybe they don't really want to cause an argument or, be disrespectful or whatnot, but so they might write down what they're feeling at the time. And it could be, something that they don't want nobody else to read or hear. So
Right.
it's just their way of getting it out, like venting sort of way. Some people vent, they go to people and just vent and talk and talk and talk, and it makes them feel a little better. Some people do it by writing. That's a good
Hmm.
point. That's a good point. So, what about in this day and age, the social media communication?
Oh, oh snap! Yeah, that was a big one. Social media, right? Especially you got social media bullies. That is a very deep one. Because there was something I have these conversations all the time. Sometimes I feel like I talk to you or somebody else, but people tend to read like messages, right? So like if someone sends me a text message, if I'm feeling some type of way and I read that message at that moment, I'm probably going to read it with the emotion that I feel, not in
Yeah,
the way that they
absolutely.
send it. And so that goes into a lot of that's also important why as you're working, like, progressing with communication and just being effective about it, like how to have boundaries, you know what I mean? Like for yourself and for other people, like like knowing who you allow to speak to you or into you, right? And
Yeah,
then what you respond to, because not everything warrants your attention. And so I think that because like a phone, like if you hear like a ding, and we have like everything connected, every social media on the planet, bringing us a notification, it's like we're so programmed to like see everything and respond to everything. And I think that fills us up too much too quick. Like it overstimulates us to a point where we need to communicate effectively with the people that matter the most. It affects it because we have all this stuff in our mind. You know, so I think it's like learning how to like filter those things out. But with social media, I think we see that a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of just a lot. Like it's almost too much.
lies.
Right, lies, right, and just so much that I think that we need to learn from that,
Yeah.
and protect our.
Definitely dangerous, and how fast it spreads, how fast
Oh my God,
social
that
media or information or communication, so to speak,
right.
spreads throughout the country or throughout the world. And it's just very dangerous because you can have the wrong information being communicated and it'll spread quick. And they always say a lie spreads faster than the truth.
Right, yeah, and then when you hear something, you read something, it's like you take it to be true, like
Yeah.
you don't even sometimes you don't even test things. Then I ask people myself too, but I've seen it in other people. You just vomit whatever you ate, you just vomit it out, like, oh, okay, yeah, this is, and don't test it, so that's a big one too.
Yeah. So how do
And
we? So we had that's like some type of training, conditioning. We had to condition ourselves not to
yeah,
take it serious. And
for sure.
a lot of times, I feel like I've been working on that, for the past few years, on whenever I read something, not to take it serious at the moment.
Mm,
Because some people's personality, they can read stuff. They can read like red cell phones, cause cancer, and so they'll be avoiding everybody that got a red cell phone or avoiding red cell phones altogether just from an article that they read and stuff like that.
right.
And so I feel like you know although being cautious is always good, but you really have to take the time and investigate whatever you're reading and your information, the source and stuff like that. And then you have to apply it to the logic. Once you get the information, you have to apply it to the logic so that it becomes wisdom, and depending on your background, like obviously we have a spiritual background, so our connection with God, everything is filtered through there. We have to filter
Right.
it through our faith.
Yep.
So but the average person,
Thank
you think
God for that. Is what I
say
can
that
say.
again.
So thank God for that because
Yeah, because you think the average person or the whoever don't have that faith filter, right? They don't have that biblical filter. They just go by what they see or how they feel. You
right,
know,
right.
it's
There's a moral compass, right, or that moral standard. So
exactly, and then
that's
they
what
just
definitely measures our
spread it to
hearts.
the next.
Yeah, for real, for real. No, that was good though. Social media definitely is a big one, especially because we see it. The time now, it's really morphing into digital age, and so that's it's a big one. I think it's a no. I think it's a whole other topic personally, but I think
Absolutely.
it's big. I think it's a very big thing to be mindful of. And I do. I must say, I really like that block feature, and I like the hide feature on Facebook.
Oh yeah, yeah. The
I'm just
block and
saying, like,
hide.
there's just some things that you just don't want to give your time to. And I'm not encouraging, animosity or anything, but I'm just saying, like, there are tools, right? There are tools on social media. It's that. I mean, it's that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, do you feel like um, at this point in time, the era that we're living through, communication is more important, or as far as business wise, and just period, do you feel it's more important or less important than back in the day, or is the same? It's equally important.
I think that communication, like, I don't think there was ever a point where it should have, like, gone down.
Yeah, it
But
was a trick
again,
question.
right, yeah. I'm like, but I think that, yeah, no, communication is communication, I mean, that's just how we were connected.
Yeah,
We communicate in different ways. So, right, so we have nonverbal, we have verbal communication, but it's still a way that we're connected. So I think, yeah,
you ever put communication on your resume and on a
no,
for a job for like you fill out a job
effective
application,
communicator,
huh?
effective communicator, like all these titles and stuff. I told you earlier,
No, for
I'm
skills.
for
For
skills. No, I
skills.
got you.
I do it all the time. Like
That's
when they
not a
ask you to
bad
list,
idea. It's not a bad idea.
man, you better put when I was filling out applications and they asked the list of skills, communication was right on the top.
Mm,
Communication skills, um, computer skills.
right. Yes, right. Microsoft and everything. No, that's actually interesting because that is a skill, right?
Yeah,
Another thing that I wanted to let you know because skill is something that you might have it naturally, like a talent or gift for it, but also it needs to be developed.
yeah,
So wherever we are, I mean, you're in a different stage that I'm at with communication, and so this is where we learn.
yeah,
Um, and likewise for everybody, but I think because skills need to be developed and need to be worked on, there are so many books out there. There are podcasts out there. If I feel like I'm struggling with something, I look it up on YouTube or Spotify or something, and I find something in that specific topic that I want to develop in. And I think that we've got to tap into those things instead of like, and there's, obviously there's people and comments and whatever, but this needs to be something that's always like working on yourself needs to be like a job.
constant. Yeah,
Yeah,
for
it
sure.
needs to be a job. So, and repetition is the mother of skill. So if you're constantly like thinking about it, okay, I'm going to work on this. I'm going to, listen to this book. I'm going to listen or read this book, listen to this podcast. I think that those are important. Those steps are important.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that we all can become better communicators. Remember,
Right.
better communicator, better experiences. They go
Right.
hand in
Right.
hand. They go
They
hand in
do.
hand.
They do. They do.
So, any last thoughts? I think we've come to the conclusion of our communication, man. I loved it. very, very important and very, you know, information, a lot of information that was put out today about communicating and becoming a better communicator. Again, like we talked about before, it's tied to every experience in our lives, from
Mhm.
relationships to work. When you at work, knowing how to communicate with your coworkers, with your supervisors, with customers, all
Absolutely.
these things is important. In order for you to get some of the things that you need, or get some of the things that you want, or to get to the levels you want, you have to know how to communicate. You have to. And you know,
Absolutely.
and I like I said, I've been putting communication down on my application as a skill for the past 20 years.
Wow.
Even when I wasn't even a good communicator, it was just a skill. I know how to
Yeah.
talk to people.
Right. Yeah. No, that's good, and that's part of knowing the environment, too. Being observant of the environment, so it's good.
Yeah.
I really
So
had no fun thought, so it is.
So I was gonna say, before we end, I wanted to talk about some communication barriers, right? What are some of the barriers that help that break? I guess we can call it not necessarily barriers, but interference. Some type of
Yeah.
interference when it comes to communicating, such
Yeah.
as social status or class or education.
Oh my
Education,
God,
we have.
Adrian, this is a big one. Yeah, that's a huge one. It's big. I'm sorry, I cut you off, but you were
No,
saying
you didn't. Go
social
ahead.
class. Okay. No, social class is huge, man. Especially, man. I mean, I have had this conversation. I have to talk a lot, can you tell? But um, social class, when you think about it, it's kind of like it could be a barrier, right? But you can also use it to your advantage when you've worked on the skill. You know what I'm saying? Like when you've made, because there's people that, I mean, again, the Bible, right? Like the gift you're anointed will bring you before kings. So, I mean, there are moments in your life where you know your stuff and you are in authority, right? And you're in authority and it'll break, and you can be in a different social class than somebody else, but that, because you are in authority and because you've worked on something or whatever the case may be, or you've developed in that area, and you can impress anybody in whatever social class, like in anyone who's higher social class, if you want to apply that. But also language, right? Language, I think, is a big one. Like the
Language
different
is
languages.
a huge
That's
barrier.
huge. That's a
Obviously, the obvious, when you have people who don't speak the language, when
right.
you have to work with people that barely speak English, or they don't, because this is our English country, so you have people that
Primarily, yeah.
barely speak the language. So those are strong barriers as well.
Yeah, yeah. How about you, Adrian? Like, is your wife fluent in English?
Yes.
She is, okay. So really quick, it's funny because my husband, he speaks that his first language is Spanish, and so when we first got together, my Spanish wasn't always the best because I grew up in New York. My thing was more like Spanglish and not like speaking proper. So my Spanish is like now it's gotten better, but I've noticed that in the past with my communication or my speaking, sometimes it was like it wasn't registering for my husband, and he's like, "What?" I'm like, "Ah, forget it, like, just forget it." And I've gotten frustrated because like I'm communicating, you know what I mean? Like I'm
Yeah.
talking, and it's so frustrating when someone doesn't understand what you're saying because of that whatever barrier.
So you
So
was talking. So you were speaking in English.
I would speak like some language. Sorry,
You
English
don't
and
know what it
Spanish.
was.
I'm like, sí, tú sabes la cosa, the thing that does this, and I'm like just mixing the both languages up.
Wow.
But my
So you
husband,
obviously had to get you. So his first language, you say, was Spanish,
correct, yes.
and you wasn't good in Spanish.
Not that I wasn't really honed in that language because it was more Spanglish, so there wasn't a lot of proper pronunciation. But my husband's so gracious. Like he is so good at teaching. He is so patient. Oh Lord, God bless him. So he's like I said, he's so gracious, and he would teach me, and because he writes and he's an author, so he was just amazing, and I love it. I love when I'm being corrected because it's for the better. You know what I mean? To make
What
myself.
about his? What about his English?
His English is good too, but he's more comfortable with
Right.
Spanish because that's his first language. Like with me, I'm most comfortable with English. That's my first language. Um, so it's the same thing. Yeah.
So, well, I always say, I always tell my wife because she speaks fluent, both English and Spanish
Mhm.
very well. I mean, I don't know how well. I don't speak Spanish. I
It
just
sounds
know,
good.
I just know she communicates with, all
Yeah.
levels from professionally to, whatever.
Mhm.
But I told her I was like, obviously we finna have a son, and look, she just chimed in. And I told her, I said, there's no way that my son is going to know more Spanish than me. That's not going to happen. So I'm going to be learning right when he learned.
Oh,
I don't care if it's the little kids' books or the bunny rabbits speaking Spanish and whatever it is. I'm going
I
to be
got you.
reading and learning those books at the same time.
That's not a bad goal. That's a goal, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. I told her
yeah.
she should have been taught me Spanish. She's slipping.
No, no. I don't know. It's a two-way street. I'm just saying.
No, she should have been teaching. So,
um,
but there
yeah,
another barrier too. What about age and experience? A lot of time
yeah.
this causes barriers because like sometimes with me and my wife, there's an age difference, so our lens that we see could be different. You
Mm,
know, I could be looking
yeah.
from a more experienced view, and she can be looking for, from a view where she doesn't have that experience. So her perception is going to be different. And so when you're
Right.
communicating about the same thing, sometimes it could, create a barrier or some miscommunication.
It's a barrier. Or not. It's a barrier, but it can be a barrier, and it
Can be
can
a
also
barrier,
be
not that it
like the
is. It depends on the
opportunity.
individual.
Right, exactly. And because you're an opportunist, I'm assuming your wife is too. So it's like there's a way to take advantage of that situation,
Yeah.
and learn like from that. Okay, like okay, our like your perspective could be this, hers could be something else. So I think it's a good learning
But it's
thing.
just like you mentioned, it takes the patience. Like you said, your husband had patience with you.
It's
So
I'm
right.
so
So
grateful for
sometimes
that.
we have to have patience with
Yeah,
the other person, either
for sure.
in, you know, their understanding of what they're
Hmm.
viewing or whatever the situation is. You
Right.
know, what about obviously culture? Culture creates a barrier when you have an individual that's they have a lot of slang or their culture is one way,
Right.
and then you have another person who's used to a different culture, and now they have to communicate back and forth together.
Ooh. I think that's where grace comes in. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Because
absolutely.
you can be like even the most well-spoken person could be uneducated in another area.
Yeah.
So I think that that's where really grace comes in. It's like understanding like we don't have it all together, and take the person for who because they're expressing themselves, right? If you're yelling me up and this and that or whatever, whatever. I'm just giving an example because especially because I live in urban communities, so when you're saying like when you're speaking a certain way, whatever we're talking, you know what I mean? Like just it's cool. You're expressing yourself. That's who you are, right? That's a part of your personality. So yeah, but um, that could definitely be
Challenging.
situated. It could be challenging, yeah, because some
Challenging.
people don't vibe, and that's okay. If you
Yeah.
don't vibe with the person, that's totally fine. Yeah.
Like I just had a conversation with a friend of mine, and he was telling me how his I don't know if it was his uncle or whoever it was married to a white lady, right? And he was black, but she was raised in the hood. So the way she talked, the way she act, all her mannerisms was that was like a black girl in the hood. And so it was hard for him to adjust to that because, he was thinking that, maybe she was being disingenuous or, but
Mm,
but that's how she was raised, you
gotcha.
know?
No, I'm so sorry. You just made me think of. There's a term for this, coach, and it's I forgot. Where like people like they change the way that they speak based off
Uh-huh.
of the environment that they're in. And I
Yeah.
remember seeing it on the news or something because they were like bashing some politician person for doing that. But the reason why I say that is some people will take it like like it's hard to connect because it's like, but that's where those pre like assumptions are
Yeah,
made and like how we think people should be based
yeah,
off of their physical appearance, right? Like
yeah,
how
absolutely.
judgmental it can be.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
So just think if if you have a black girl or a white girl or whatever, and you see her talking Spanish or displaying some of the Spanish culture,
Hmm.
and because she was raised that way, and that's all she knows.
Right.
You would think that this person is faking or they're trying to, pretend or whatever the situation is. But some people, is really raised like that, and that's
Right.
all they know.
Yes. And that's actually made me so curious because I've come across people like that.
Yeah,
And I'm like,
yeah.
like,
You try to be nice. You try to
but
be
it,
nice
it
right
just
now.
right, but it sparks curiosity for some reason. And I'm like I was probably a little bit judgmental, but I really want to know what you're about. So I
Yeah,
give that person some time. You know, you got to give people a
you got to
chance.
give them time. Yeah.
That's funny.
It happens all the time too. It happens all the time, especially being black, and then you come across some of the white guys, in our community. Like when I first moved down here to Florida, you know, and I worked in the detention center. It was that was the experience because some of the white guys that was in the the youth that was in the detention center was acting just like some of the black guys that I known in the hood,
Mm,
and it was strange, but obviously that's how they was raised. And some
right.
of them even used the N word too,
Mm.
just regular like they was black, and I was like, wow, I'm like. I'm like, we where I come from, they don't, y'all don't talk like that. It was a shock. It
Some
was
people
a shock.
grow up. Some people grow up that way, or some people also. It's the adapt, right? Right. We have the tendency to adapt to our
To the
environment.
environment,
So
yeah, yeah,
a
their
lot of times
influence.
it's just adaptation that people just they're like, okay, well, for me to just kind of mix.
Yeah,
Somebody's straight up confused at what they're saying, and like this person's like, So I
so,
mean,
but it's
it's
hard.
definitely
And and at the same time, you still it works both ways. Like you
yeah,
have some of the people in the black community, or and they've been raised around professionals, or I guess they don't sound like the typical black person, or and you don't expect it. You
right.
don't expect it. Now we always have these preconceived notions that black people talk one way, white people talk another way, Spanish people talk another way, and stuff like that. And so
Hmm.
whenever you have these preconceived notion and you see somebody talking or sounding like the other person,
Right,
then it becomes like, whoa, this is a shock to me. Like, are you
right.
serious? Like, are you faking, or what's the deal?
And I think it's also it's tied into education as well. You
Yeah,
know, like the education. I mean, I can't say for educational level sounds just crazy, but back to your point with uh, class, social
yeah,
class, right? So I mean, I think it's a matter of like, for instance, just an example of myself. I lived in New York. I was born and raised in New York. So when I was in school, I remember we had like sometimes the accent comes out, sometimes whatever. But I remember making the decision. I was in grade school that when I grew up, or when I was gonna, work here, whatever, that I was going to make sure that whoever I spoke to understood what I was saying. And if it had to like, if it meant me getting rid of certain accents and just working on my pronunciation of words, I like made up my mind for that. Um, so that's why I say it's education, and it's also like your own mindset,
yeah,
like who
yeah.
you think. But for me,
So you made so that's why you made a decision not to carry that accent, huh?
coffee and water and like,
Exactly. I was just gonna say it. I was just gonna say it.
and sometimes it comes out,
That
sometimes it's
Rosie
just
Perez.
right. Sometimes it's just like whatever. You know, like something comes out. But what I mean to say is like now, like I go to New York and I see my family, and I'm like, dang, I love them so much, and I love that about them. You know what I mean? Because that is just a part of who they are. But I just made a decision that for myself, I wanted to do things differently. You know, and I think we see it everywhere. I think like in general, just us as people, black, white, whatever, red, brown, whatever, everywhere, and whatever social class, like you just see it, you know. So I think it should. We've seen enough of it. Well, I have to break that limiting like thought of like a black person should speak this way, a Spanish person should speak this way, and a white person should speak this way. You know, I think like it just breaks it for me because I've seen super, you know, in the high class, you know, black folks and Spanish folks and white folks that just speak, they just speak, you know.
Right, that's right.
So,
¿Qué tipo la música escuchar?
Yeah, that just I almost went over my head, man.
Almost.
That was cool, but no, this is a good talk. I actually got to get going because this can go into a whole other topic. So
exactly.
Awesome.
So, but yeah, again, that's all I have. Do you have any final thoughts? She do that because of my Spanish. I was speaking in Spanish.
Oh, it's like my husband. He's like, "Oh my gosh, ese español tuyo, like that Spanish of yours." But I love it. I'm like, that's why I got you, honey. Like,
exactly, man. Exactly. She need to step up on her game, man. I'm gonna change the whole game. I'm gonna be showing up. I'm gonna be a real Puerto Rican. That's my word.
Puerto Rican?
Yeah, I told her I'm a Puerto Rican. I'm gonna be tricking everybody.
Puerto Rican.
Yeah.
But yeah, no final thoughts. I think this is great. Super important. Who you're around matters, right? Who you're around matters. Definitely, like, just be mindful of the people you keep around you, how they talk, how they treat other people, and just think about, do I want to be around that? Do I want to put myself or expose myself to that, or do I want to start being a difference? You know, that's pretty much it.
It's definitely going to affect your communication. So again, that's what you know. We wrapping up our talk. We gave some principles on 7 basics to be a better communicator. Some of the basic keys, and we also went into some barriers as well. You know, some barriers between communicating between people and professional wise, language wise, education wise, age wise, stuff like that. So very, very important stuff. We appreciate everybody that tuned in today. Our boy Jody was on today. He had to go early. I appreciate him. Denarius, my wife Shakina, Jacqueline, Hutchinson was on as well. So again, until next Friday, providing that the baby is not here,
Oh, stop! That's right.
Exactly. So I don't even know what we got scheduled for next Friday.
We're talking about lifestyle next Friday. We're going to be talking about raising your kids.
Oh, raising kids.
Children, yeah.
Oh, this is going to be interesting for
man,
sure. It's going to be interesting for sure. There's some people got some bad kids out there.
Baby's kids, remember that cartoon?
Exactly. We know some people that got some baby's kids for sure.
Oh my gosh.
My wife, look. See, she said she want to talk about that. Definitely, we'll bring Miss Mays in.
I'm excited for that.
She work around a lot of kids every day, teaching them how to dance and stuff like that. So again, appreciate you guys tuning in to the Impact Podcast Show. Until next Friday, Coach A saying out.
Melissa?
I'm going ahead and do our outro video again. Let me do it.
Yeah, look, treat me like a rock. When you see me, I'm electrifying. Yeah, only talk I do is edifying. They say preach, they say church when I'm testifying. Hear you running at the mouth, that's a lot of mileage. Grew up in the woods, 30 miles from the nearest college.